Ladies and gentlemen, if my heart gave out right now, if I dropped dead on this stage, I'd go with a smile on my face. Not because I ain't afraid of dying. I've been scared plenty, scared so bad I used to hold myself together at night just to keep from losing my mind. But because I've lived a life where every heartbeat's a scar, every breath a plea for forgiveness. My name's James Sullivan. I'm 75 years old and I'm a priest. But before I found God, I was a soldier, a survivor crawling out of the ashes of war, a ghost stumbling through my own darkness. I'm standing here today not for fame, not to show off. I'm here to tell y'all that no matter how deep life drags you down, no matter how much you think you've lost, there's still a light. I found that light even with blood on my hands, even with a heart so broken I thought it'd never beat again. I was born in a little nowhere town called Cloverdale, Tennessee, back in 1950. My dad was a coal miner, a hard man with calloused hands and a voice like the wind rattling through those dark tunnels. My mom, Ruth, she was the toughest woman I ever knew. She raised 5 of us kids on scraps, cornbread and beans most nights, and Bible stories she'd read by the flicker of an oil lamp. I was the baby, a skinny kid with big eyes and bigger dreams of being a pilot, soaring over the clouds to escape the hunger gnawing at our bellies. But life don't care much for a kid's dreams. When I was 16, my dad died in a mine collapse. They brought him home, his face black with coal dust, eyes shut like he was just sleeping. I stood there, watching my mom hold him and cry so quiet it broke me. And for the first time I wondered, where's God when we need him? Things got harder after that. Mom worked herself to the bone in a sewing factory to keep us fed, but it was never enough. Then, in 1968, when I turned 18, the Vietnam War came knocking. I didn't want to go. Who'd want to leave their mom, leave those golden cornfields of Tennessee to walk into hell? But I didn't have a choice. I got my draft notice, and Mom saw me off at the Cloverdale train station. She stood there, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, holding my hand and saying, "Jimmy, God's going to watch over you. Don't forget to pray." I nodded to make her feel better, but deep down, I didn't buy it. If God was real, why'd he take my dad? Why'd he let a war rip the world apart? I put on that uniform, grabbed my rifle, and climbed aboard that train, not knowing I'd never come back the same Jimmy. War ain't like anything I ever pictured. I landed in Vietnam in March of '68, an 18-year-old kid with bright eyes and a heart full of dumb hope. But a few weeks in, that kid was gone. They sent me to an infantry unit in the Mekong Delta, where every day was a fight to stay alive. I watched my buddies die. Tommy, my best friend, got blown apart by a mine right in front of me. We were patrolling through the jungle, Tommy walking a few steps ahead, cracking jokes about marrying his girl back home. Then, boom! The ground shook, smoke everywhere, and Tommy was gone. I ran to him, but all that was left was half of him, blood soaking the dirt. I held what was left, screaming his name, but he didn't answer. I sat there in that jungle, cradling his broken body, and I cried like a baby. I looked up at the sky and yelled, "Where are you, God? Where are you when we're dying out here?" But there was no answer, just gunfire and bombs ringing in my ears. I made it through 2 years there, 68 to 70. Came back to the States with a jagged scar on my left shoulder from a shrapnel hit and a soul torn to pieces. But I wasn't Jimmy no more. I was a shell. Nightmares kept me up. Tommy's screams, the blood, the faces of the men I killed. Yeah, I killed people. I didn't want to, but war don't give you a choice. I remember one time in a little village facing down a Vietnamese soldier. He was young like me, eyes wide with fear, hands shaking on his gun. I pulled the trigger first. He dropped, blood pooling around him, and I stood there watching his eyes fade out. I kept asking myself, who am I? A soldier or a murderer? I didn't know. Back home, I couldn't fit in. I drank myself stupid, wandered the streets of Memphis, picking fights with anyone who looked at me too long. My mom tried to pull me back. She'd show up at my rundown apartment with a loaf of her cornbread, sit there praying over me. But I shoved her away. I told her, "Stop praying for me, Mom. God gave up on me a long time ago." She'd look at me, tears in her eyes, but she didn't argue. I knew I was hurting her, but I couldn't stop. I hated myself, hated the world that turned me into this. In '72, Mom died of a heart attack. She went quiet, left me her old Bible and a letter. She wrote, "Jimmy, you're my light. No matter how lost you get, God's gonna find you." I read it, then chucked it in a corner. I wasn't ready to believe. My life kept spiraling. Then in '75, I met Mary. She was a nurse at the hospital where I got patched up after a bar fight. She had this gentle way about her, these blue eyes like a summer sky. Mary believed I could be the old Jimmy again. We got married that year, and in '76, we had a son, Michael. Holding Michael that first time, I thought, maybe this is my shot to make things right. I tried to be a good husband, a good dad, got a job at a shipyard, cut back on the booze, even went to church a few times because Mary wanted it. But the war wouldn't let me go. The nightmares came back. I'd wake up screaming, scaring Mary and Michael half to death. I got mean, couldn't control it. One night, after a bad fight, Mary took Michael and left. She stood at the door, tears streaming, and said, "Jimmy, I can't live with a man who's already dead inside." I dropped to my knees, begging her to stay, but she walked out. I lost him. In 1980, word came that Mary and Michael died in a car wreck. Their car went off a bridge outside Nashville. No survivors. I went to the funeral, stood way back, watching their coffins go into the ground. I didn't dare get close. I didn't deserve to. I killed them, not with my hands, but with my weakness, with the pain I couldn't shake. I stayed by their graves all night, rain pouring down, screaming, "God, if you're real, why'd you take everything from me?" I was done. I pulled out my old service pistol, put it to my temple, finger shaking on the trigger. But then, in that storm, I heard a voice, not out loud, but deep inside me. It said, "James, I never left you. I didn't pull that trigger, don't know why, but I felt this warmth cut through the freezing rain." I tossed the gun aside and stumbled into a little church nearby. I fell to my knees at the altar, and for the first time in decades, I prayed. I didn't ask for anything for myself, just said, "God, if you still got a use for me, give me a reason to keep going." And he answered, not with thunder or miracles, but with quiet. The ache in my chest lightened like someone was carrying it with me. I stayed there all night, and when the sun came up, I knew I had to change. That's when my new life started. I studied theology at a small seminary in Kentucky, and in '95, at 45, I became a priest. I've been all over since then, from the slums of Detroit, helping homeless folks find a spark of hope, to war zones in the Middle East, holding orphans and praying over dying soldiers. I've met people like the old me, lost souls chewed up by war and loss. I've held their hands, listened to their stories, shared mine. Every time I help someone, it's like I'm clawing back a piece of what I owe. But I ain't doing it alone. God's right there guiding me. Now at 75, I ain't got much time left. My body's falling apart. Legs shake when I walk. Hands can't lift what they used to. But my heart's never been stronger. I've lived a life full of hurt. Lost my dad, my friends, my family. Lost myself in war's shadows. But I found the light, and that light's God. He didn't promise me an easy road, but He promised He'd never leave me. I'm here on America's Got Talent, not for glory or cash. I'm here to tell y'all, no matter how low life drags you, no matter how hopeless it feels, there's a light waiting. I'm living proof. What's left of my life, I'm giving it to carry other folks' pain. I pray nobody has to go through what I did. Watching a friend die in your arms, losing a family 'cause you couldn't hold it together, standing in the rain with a gun to your head. I pray for y'all, every soul in this room, every person watching me out there, to find happiness, to feel loved, to live in the light. If I've got a talent, it's surviving the dark to find hope. I can't sing worth a lick, can't dance to save my life, but I can pray for all of us. And if God lets me, I'll use my last breath to say, thank you, Lord, for never giving up on me.